pregnant can be a very insular experience. The universe can suddenly sort of shrink, so that all a mother's mind can hold is on what is happening inside of her. And who can blame her, right? It is a lot to consider. It's a lot to grasp. I remember my months being pregnant with Nora. I became acutely aware of my body for the first time in my life. I had never at all thought about my hips and how they should feel. I had never before thought about the effort in taking in a deep and full breath. Things I ate, things I saw, they became triggers in startling ways, so that I remember the smell of roasting chicken sent me into convulsions. My body responded, whether I wanted it to or not, to basically everything around me. It was as though this entire universe was inside of me. And on some days, I was just kind of trying to hold it together. And it's not just the mother that senses this insularity of pregnancy either. Spouses, partners, friends, and family, they sometimes feel that they aren't quite fully there, that they can't fully understand what a mother is undergoing. They're at kind of arm's length of this experience. It's in front of them, but it's still separate from them. And I want to consider for a moment the one who wants desperately to become pregnant and who is not. That longing to know what a pregnant body feels like, and to have that experience of childbirth all around them except within, it's an awfully hollow feeling, and it makes many feel desperate and isolated. Then there are those folks, many of them, that they're just not kid folks, you know what I'm saying? It's just, that whole childbearing, child-rearing thing is about someone else. It's another person's story. It's apart and separate from what motivates and matters to those folks. So that pregnancy, while extraordinary, is not the most connected experience. And I thought of that particular aspect of pregnancy when I read today's gospel from Luke. This beautiful scene drew my attention in this new way. Here we have in our holy scriptures a most extraordinary exchange, and it is a very rare gem to have two named women brought to voice without even a man present for once, and the narrator, likely a man, takes a back seat for once. And what we get is this tremendous gift. Two highly unlikely pregnancies. Two extraordinary life stories. Two women who could have been completely wrapped up in their own universes. But that's not what we get. Instead, we get the opposite. Now, we wouldn't get the nuance and the vulnerability, we wouldn't get this beauty without Elizabeth. She is a main character in this Jesus narrative, but often kind of gets sidelined or goes unnoticed. And it's funny, when Jenna and I decided that we were going to write the pageant this year, we knew we were going to write it from Mary's perspective. And certainly from that perspective, you can't not have Elizabeth. She is vitally important to the story. But in writing it, we realized Elizabeth is never in Christmas pageants. Have you noticed this? She's never a character. You get the shepherds, you get the animals, you get the Holy Family, of course, but you even get a star. Other people even, we did too. We put the wise people there. They don't show up that night. But they get there, they're dramatized, they're sung about in carols and hymns. They're noticed far more than our Elizabeth, who is a big part of Mary's journey to motherhood and to Jesus' entrance into our world. In fact, when we were gathering our kids and youth and parents to do our first read-through and casting of the script this year, Ava, a senior in high school, was looking over the casting list, and she said, "Who the heck is this Elizabeth?" She wanted to know. And then she was asking all the people around her in the room, and nobody else in the room knew either. She was in very good company. Elizabeth, as we see from the scripture today, is a prophet. She's foretelling of Jesus' birth and importance to the world. And her prophecy harnesses her unique and personal experience with God and with her cousin Mary. And she has a lot to teach us about how to prepare, how to make room, how to welcome not only the Christ child into our lives, but how to welcome each other. Elizabeth opens the door, she sees Mary and asks her in. Now, I don't just mean that she invited her across the threshold, although she did. Elizabeth took Mary in. Really took her in. So far, in fact, that she says, "For as soon as I heard the sound of your greeting, the child in my womb leaped for joy." Such tenderness. This goes beyond empathy. And I believe it's the essence of divine hospitality. Elizabeth could have said, "My child, my body, my whole world takes you, your body, your whole world in." She could have understandably remained preoccupied or disconnected in her own world. She had plenty going on. She could remain untouched, unmoved, or even just sort of politely distant. But in the most intimate way possible, Luke describes these two women and their connection. And it is real, and it is deep, and it is different. Elizabeth is so in tune with Mary's joy that it invades her own body. Mary's joy becomes Elizabeth's joy. And Mary must have felt very seen, so assured by Elizabeth's support. And we know this because what we have from Mary isn't just a curt, "Thank you very much." It's not a, "That's so nice." In fact, she doesn't even speak. What does she do? She sings, Mary Ellen, she sings, you are right. She sings out in praise. She herself opens up. And in 10 glorious verses, we hear Mary's voice. "My soul magnifies the Lord. Rejoice," she cries out. Mary reveals the total and utter awe she is feeling. She can't believe God chose her. And she tells us this through this conversation with Elizabeth, how it feels not only to be giving birth to this Christ child, but how it feels for her to be born into this moment, into her own sacred worth. That same moment. These are precious and private experiences for Mary, and she does share them. She shares them because Elizabeth first took her in, and she really took her in. So Elizabeth teaches us something about this whole season of Advent, about expectant waiting, because in her gestation, she doesn't shrink away from the world, from those around her. She doesn't disconnect. Rather, Elizabeth attunes herself, and her pregnancy lifts her into consciousness. And she channels that gift of sensitivity and uses it as a bridge to the outside world, to encounters that are unknown as of yet. Her waiting womb provides a way for her to perceive the connections between herself and everybody else. So here we are, and we are still in Advent. And I wonder about the wisdom of this woman. I wonder, how attuned are we? While we are waiting this Advent, do we even recognize that we aren't alone? That we are, in fact, waiting together? How are we going to welcome this Christ into our lives and into our souls if we aren't able even to open up to each other in the meantime? Perhaps if we consider pregnancy, the state of the pregnant body, and how it influenced Mary and Elizabeth, we can learn better how we can wait and how we can do that together. Feminist theologian Anne Elvey writes about pregnancy and how a woman may experience the intersection of transcendence and immanence, activity and passivity, certainty and uncertainty, knowing and unknowing. It's a time of total flux, when the strict divisions tend to kind of blur. There is, in fact, a blurring of the self and the other. So it isn't quite true that during pregnancy there is I, one, and you, one. I, to the pregnant body, is wider than one. It holds more than just the interests of the self. The pregnant body becomes home to the potential for more room, more life, more connection, more. And while boundaries between the self and the other erode, creating a miraculous space where both can exist and thrive, there's this wonderful gift, time. Now, if you talk to somebody pregnant, certainly around the 8th or 9th month, they're not going to think that time is much of a gift. They might have testy annoyance about how slowly it is all going. But think of it. There are 9 months given to anticipate, to plan, to prepare for a new life. And that is a lesson that we can use during this Advent. We can take the time to be together, to make use of it, because we need the time. When it comes down to it, pregnancy is change embodied. It's the morphing, stretching, becoming. It's the process of creation. And it is a process by which what is inside meets the outside. It's a time when what is or was very private becomes very public. So what is waiting to be born in you this day? And what needs to shift or change to make space for that to happen? Because while pregnancy signals new life, it is also a signal of loss. It's all part of this change. And Mary and Elizabeth, they show us how to do that too. We can learn from them that what connects us is greater than what divides us. We can learn from them that our stories can be stretched to hold somebody else's story too. It turns out that there is room in the womb. We can learn from them that it is necessary to expand ourselves, to make space in our lives for more joy, more love, more hope, and yes, more peace. We can learn to take advantage of the time to ponder these extraordinary things right along with Mary. We can learn along with these very wise women that in the moment of Christ's birth, we can be born into new life too. It starts with embracing the divinely given sensitivity that helps us see and feel how our struggles, our fears, our celebrations, and even our questions don't have to separate us from somebody else's struggles, somebody else's fears, celebrations, and even their questions. Our most intimate and private experiences can be a bridge to kinship and connection, deep understanding and respect for one another. All we have to do is open the door and welcome it in. Amen.
Amen.